Hi, this is Emmy Thomas. I'm here with Kid X. So Kid X, the one thing I know about Kid X. Oh, by the way, what are your pronouns? I forgot to ask.
Oh, I use they them,
They
but
them. Okay.
yeah.
So Kid X, one thing that I thought about when I got Kid X's email is very interesting because your father, right, is diagnosed antisocial personality disorder.
Yes.
Okay, so I was like, "Oh, this is really interesting." I don't think we've had anybody so far, with this exact exact kind of characteristics. But I'll start off asking you, as I do with everybody, what is it like to be you?
Um, it's pretty solid. I don't know. Very boring a lot of the time, especially recently, since the pandemic has started, just because um I feel like my world got smaller. And it's just uh well, yeah, I don't know. It's pretty solid like right now because I'm doing a lot with work that I care about. And otherwise it's just I have no idea what to say here. I have no problems, but it's very boring, and I find myself just kind of not thinking for long amounts of time.
Yeah. How about maybe start off with your childhood. Like, what was it like? Maybe some differences that you kind of noticed, or start off with like your college years, or whatever else kind of strikes you. Like, when did you kind of think I'm a little bit different than other people, or maybe what, my dad's a little bit different than other people.
Well, so I mean, with myself, I think it took me like a probably until I was a teenager to realize that I was different. But in retrospect, I definitely was very different from like a very young age. Like when I was 5 or 6, I think I just like really around then are like the earliest memories I have of it. Like I was really caught up in like kind of playing games with people like as a child, but like like I used to like put the garbage bag over my head in front of my mom and just like kind of suck it in so that like it's like, oh mom, look, I'm suffocating, and I'd be giggling and she'd be like terrified, but I thought that was so funny. And it's only recently that I've been like, oh, okay, that wasn't normal.
Hmm.
And just kind of behavior like that carried on throughout my life into my like early middle teen years, I think, quite a bit. And it was never meant with any maliciousness ever. uh but that's certainly like one thing that I guess I look back on. I also like really struggled to, I don't know, connect with people, if that makes sense. I always had like super close friends, but it was never like I was never being honest, I guess, was the way that I was the way that I experienced it at the time. But there was a lot of confusion for me until like relatively recently about like what honesty meant for me. Just because I had so few opportunities to do that, just like say things in like a non-mediated way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So how did you learn about honesty?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know when like I could point to as like a specific moment for learning about honesty, or like my version. I think probably it was like sometime after I graduated, um, just like with the relationship that I'm in now. Uh, we were together for long enough. I don't even want to say that it was like some kind of like special quality to the person nearly as much as it was just that like we were together for long enough that like something slipped, or I don't even know. I mean, honestly, our relationship was very like kind of, it was the best one that I'd been in from my like perspective, and I felt like a certain like easiness with them. And as a result, I think maybe I just attempted to like kind of just be more open in like a not joking way, or like, you know what I mean, just say something. But honestly, I don't really know. Uh, I just have the sense now that I have a more solid notion of like who I am or like what the truth means for me.
Yeah.
You know.
And then how long have you been in this relationship with this person?
Oh goodness. I think
Like roughly, maybe like
yeah,
short,
like
short, medium, long.
4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
4 or 5 years.
okay.
Yeah, something like that.
So that's pretty good. And did you have like relationships long as anywhere near that length before? Have you ever had?
Well, so I would always I'd go through like these like year to year and a half long relationships, but they weren't. I don't know. I just kind of like a big thing for me has always been like I don't know. I get this feeling that I like have to perform in a particular way. Like I'm very afraid of being kind of exposed, if that makes sense. And for the longest time, I behaved with that fear kind of automatically, and so like I would always act like the good partner, like I would always have like these like long tails in the relationships where I just wanted it to be over, and I felt like I had no method for making it uh, fall apart or like be over without hurting my kind of social standing, like at college or wherever I was, because I was always like very caught by the notion that everyone knew each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just kind of like slowly pull away and be terrible, and then not terrible, but just not good, but not so bad that it's notable. And I just like, keep spending more and more time kind of away until they just broke up with me.
Uh-huh.
Death by a thousand cuts. But those were my like previous relationships, but they didn't really feel, real. But I'm only saying that in retrospect. So who's to say?
Yeah, so they didn't feel real. And then is it because I think you said that you were pretending in these relationships?
Yeah, yeah. Definitely was pretending. Um,
Why pretend?
I don't know. And see, this is the interesting thing. I think that like I spent I spent a lot of time like in like the like from the middle of my teens into like my early 20s or so. I think like really confused about like where I stopped and like these kind of defense mechanisms or like fears like began when it came to like exposure. And I think that really muddied the water for me in terms of like my actual motivations. I do feel like I kind of had a lack of knowledge about why I like pretended certain things or like performed certain things. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a little bit of sense, but like, I mean, a normal person or like a normal-ish person might ask or something like, what's in it for you for pretending? Like, why? Why would you have pretended? Is it because your dad, or is it because kind of the way you were raised, or is it because,
Oh yeah,
other people?
no, I think it was well the way I was raised to kind of so my father is has very much always been obsessed with like this kind of picture of normalcy or blending.
Mhm.
If I could say that there was like any significant thing that I like had imparted to me as as a young person, it was definitely that consistently throughout the years was just like this like a requirement that like yeah, okay, so it doesn't matter kind of where your like heart's at. The important thing, and he would never say this in like a way that I think he meant it to be malicious, but the important thing was like being normal, being like good, or like appearing as a good person, or like not just a good person but a stable person who doesn't ruffle feathers, not like an office worker or something like that. I mean, the funny thing is that he's always been a very intimidating person to everyone that he meets. But he very much like worships a very particular like idea of like yeah, I guess just blending is the right word. Like with like a given social sphere and not like doing things that make him seem strange. And I think that like is very much transferred over for me.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like a little bit of just camouflage, like he might your dad, for instance, this is a question, might for instance act differently in different situations. So like let's say, it was at the bar, act differently than if he was at some, some baby's baptism or something. But like in this very, a funeral, maybe start, wearing a black suit and maybe even a couple tears or what?
Oh, he couldn't do the tears. Uh, but but yeah, no, it would be like that, and then it'd be he'd be like, jovial, joking with everybody at dinner, and then he'd go off and he'd do something at work, and then you'd find out like the next day that he had like, I think a quote from him one time that he told me over the phone was, "Oh yeah, this guy he tried to hit me, so I kicked him in the head a couple of times." Like but he just said it in passing, like we were just visiting with each other, and he just like kind of notes that out of no, you know what I mean? And but it has no bearing on the rest of his like presentation. But he's just like, suddenly very blasé and violent, or like, he'll just make like the most uh, off-color joke, I think other people would say, because he like, you know, he's seen things, quote unquote. And so like, yeah, I don't know.
Hmm. So, are there any people that know the real your dad? Like, and would you include yourself amongst them?
I think if someone does, it's like I certainly do. Um, Maybe my brother, and definitely my older sister from his first relationship. And otherwise, and that's because early on in his life, when he was still like using a lot of heroin and all that, um, she was already around, and so she saw more of the like super crazy violent things. Um, and so I think that that's probably yeah, she definitely knows. I think I know. My brother, maybe. That's about it though.
Yeah, and this is kind of a weird question to ask you because I don't think you're a psychologist or something, but like where do you come out on nature nurture? Are there things about like your upbringing or things that you know about your dad or things that you know about your siblings or the genetics or your family tree or whatever that kind of push you one way or the other or
Well, I think it's definitely a mix, of course, but I come out on the idea that yeah, I'd say that nature is pretty significant here, just because my my brother is actually from another he's from my mother's first marriage, and so he's not related, right? And he saw all the things that I did.
Mhm.
He had very different responses to them. There's also like this kind of history on my father's side of the family of psychopathic behavior that I've heard about at length, and it's I think there's certainly something there genetically. That being said, I think that like nurture changes quite a bit because like again, I'm relatively stable compared to my father, and I think that a big part of that is that our upbringings were just totally different, um, and our home lives were totally different because I mean he grew up with like in like a very abusive home. I wouldn't consider myself having grown up in an abusive home, despite some things that I think might be strange to other people. But I it was stable. My mother was especially loving. I mean, classic woman to stay with somebody like my dad for like 14, 15 years. Definitely codependent. Um, so it was I don't know, um, normal suburban upbringing. And as a result, I think that I'm capable of maybe controlling myself more, or like directing impulses in a like less dangerous like legally, or like to my personhood way. Like I've never robbed someone, I've never done heroin, smoked crack. I mean, I like would probably smoke crack somebody offered it to me, right?
Mm,
But I'm not
mhm.
like particularly interested in drugs. I'm not particularly interested in like fighting people most of the time. I'm not interested in doing these things that are like so openly like aberrant, you know? And I think one of the reasons why I'm not interested in those things is really uh, this kind of like fear, I guess, my father imparted on me of like being exposed, because like I feel like I had that fear before I even really realized what it was that could be exposed,
Mm.
which is a strange position to be in, I guess. Or like I
Yes.
don't even know what that means, but
Yes, yes, I'm definitely, yes, I think listening to your stories, that is a really interesting thing, your experience. And again, it's like unique. Like I don't think I've met or talked to somebody who has, quite that same kind of experience of, like you've probably adopted a lot of behaviors and, real quick, just so I am careful about this on the quick, rough scale of 1 to 10, where would you put yourself in terms of like psychopathic, or just say more likely than not, or less likely than not, or where on
I
probability?
so I think more likely than not, but also I don't know. Um, and this is relatively new for me, obviously. I mean, like just this kind of like self exploration.
Yes,
Um,
talking
yeah,
about it.
yeah, and I mean, I can find myself like kind of struggling to put words to these things because, like, say when I talk about it with my partner, is the only person I've talked with about it in my real life at all. I use very different terms because they're, you know, very much an empath. Um,
Yes. Is it
yeah,
is it okay to make a little to tell you a little observation, little thought
yeah,
I had about you earlier? Is
yeah,
when usually when I ask people, like what's it like to be you, they've been thinking about it, that they'll have a couple stories, okay, yeah, here's what it, and you were like, it's okay, pandemic's been rough.
yeah.
It just like you seem like definitely that's your mode of being, that's your, okay, yeah, default, yeah, pandemic, and some real safe topics.
Yeah, I think that I that's one thing that in all this like self figuring, I've been trying to square away that like kind of central, I don't know if I'd call it paranoia, but it's an irrational fear. So I guess on a certain level it is a paranoia, right? Like where even when I'm setting my mind to just, you know, cleared away, whatever, who cares? It's still there. And I don't particularly know why, except for the fact that it's like something that I just kind of have as like a social lesson from like a very, very young age. But
Yes.
yeah.
you know um do you think you think you will ever get to the point where you're not pretending, and has your dad ever gotten to that point in his life of not pretending, and do you kind of still model maybe a little bit of yourself on that, whatever it is?
Well, I try not to model myself on my dad. He's kind of a miserable person. But yeah, I don't know if I'll get to that point where I'm not pretending. I think that I'd like to on a certain level, just because it seems easier, and the moments when I'm not pretending or when I'm just kind of like going, um, yeah, in a more genuine direction or like acting in a more genuine way, I certainly have more energy because I like find that I'm like often just drained from the like attempts at like behaving in a particular way most of the time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I'd like that. I don't know how I'd necessarily arrive at it because I feel like a part of what drains me kind of keeps me from, you know, talking about it like to a therapist or something like that. Because like I mean, I'm very very good at lying to therapists, but that's like, you know, it's harder to not lie to therapists for me. But it's like not even these. It's not even the things that I feel like when I first told my partner about some of this stuff, and I said like, oh yeah, there's like, you know, some things I'm still not saying or something like that. Um, they I think, got this very particular picture of what I was concealing, and it didn't really sync up with the reality fully, right? Like a lot of the things that I'm afraid of sharing or like just like letting out are I don't know. I get the sense that despite the fact that I'm still kind of stuck in this certain presentation, uh, they're very much the things that people wouldn't expect. If does that make sense? I feel like I'm spinning a little bit here,
Yeah.
but it's just
So
the topic probably.
yeah, yeah. And we can definitely get off it too anytime you want. But so you said you're stuck in this presentation.
Mhm.
Is that kind of what it feels like to you? That it's like that there's not a connection so much between you and the way that you present to people?
Um, yeah, I guess not a connection between me and the way that I present to people. I think it's just often that I'm like kind of vacant even when I don't want to be, if that makes sense. Like I still like have this gap between what I'm thinking and what I'm meaning to express and what I'm capable of expressing. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I can't really say much more about this because it just trying to talk about it kind of like sends me into a loop with, noticing it, and then it becomes difficult to speak. But it's I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah. So you mentioned before that you get like a little bit of you seem energized when you happen to be doing things that seem less like pretending,
Yeah.
or yeah. And
Or
can you speak a
oh,
little bit
sorry.
on that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think when I managed to get my like brain not so caught up in like a particular um uh image, or like projecting a particular image, or like making sure that I know um how people are perceiving me for safety's sake, etc. I'm able to focus on something. Like, I mean, I get more done on the thing, in the thing, and it's exciting, I think, for me
Hmm.
on a certain level. Like I love I don't know, that I love like solitary activities as a result. Obviously, like uh, I do stuff like in a creative, or like I'm an artist, not an artist, a writer, and that's super perfect because like I can very much just kind of fully dissipate while I'm doing that. I don't really have that much of a sense of self while that's happening. I'm just
Hmm.
like kind of in the room, and it's very, very nice. Uh, Zeroing in on this thing that's not me. Um, and then likewise, like I also like uh, direct some projects. And when I'm doing that, despite the fact that I'm like around people, the role is a simple one. It's like a prescribed one, and everyone knows how it functions. And I know that there's some removal from my like capital S self,
Hmm.
and so I feel free to behave more freely without thinking that it'll follow me, because I feel like that's really the fear that I was trying to get at before, is just that like no matter what, everything will follow me.
Yeah.
I think that that's probably been the biggest thing that's affected my behavior throughout life, is just this like irrational notion that things are going to follow me no matter what.
It's kind of interesting. I wonder. I don't want to like harp too much on it, especially if it's like a big fear. But I do think that I see commonalities with people that I've talked to before, where there's like a certain sort of secrecy.
Yeah,
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 that psychopaths tend to prefer, which is you just prefer to not have anybody know kind of anything about you.
oh
Would
yeah,
be the
yeah,
preference,
that'd be
because
awesome.
yeah, because as you say, then it would be kind of like you're solitary all the time. If everybody wiped their memory or something every night when they went to sleep, awesome. It would be like great,
Yeah, oh
probably.
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, it's like I've like, I mean, I'm in this great relationship, and I love my partner, and I hope that we, stay together. I say that, but then also, uh, sometimes I'll just like think, oh, wouldn't it be nice if I just like disappeared, like just went somewhere else and I was a different person like tomorrow. And
Mm.
I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I think a part of it that messes me up beyond my own upbringing, or something that I like to point to too, is like just the amount of difficulty there is currently in like becoming a new person, because I feel like things follow you more now than they did, like, say, even 10 or 20 years ago. And I think that that's one of the things that really messes with my head, is the fact that like there is a certain level of truth to the fact that like you will not escape your past decisions.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
I agree. Yeah, it's interesting because when I went to college, I think I maybe mentioned this in the book or somewhere else. Like my dad was driving me up to college and was like, when I went to college, I just became a completely different person. Before I was a loser whose mom made his clothes. Here's a really sad story, super
Yeah.
sad that he mentioned, and he's like, and I was so cruel to her for doing it wrong. So he said something like, when he grew up or whatever, I guess it was pretty popular to have the little buttons on the collar, little collar buttons. And
Hmm.
so his mom wouldn't make these little collar buttons because who wants to make, if you're making a shirt, you don't want to like get in there and stitch up little collar buttons, add like these superfluous little collar buttons or whatever. So he, like was cruel to her about these shirts not having the little collar buttons. And
Oh
then the
no.
next Christmas, he gets new shirts and they all have collar buttons, except she didn't buy the little collar buttons. She just used
Oh.
normal buttons. And he was like, this is even worse. He just like went off on her, like the classic, like, this Christmas is terrible. I hate you all, or whatever type thing. And I'm like, ooh. So it's so interesting hearing his stories too. And now that he's like older, he kind of will tell stories, different stories, than he used to kind of regularly or whatever. So you're like, okay, we can kind of piece together what happened here a little bit in
Right.
terms of some of your ish. But yeah, on the way up to college, he's like, yeah, I just became a cool person. I asked people out on a bunch of dates. I bought new shirts.
He's really fixated on the shirts.
Yes, and then he actually like got kicked out of the school because he was just like practical jokester too. I think he got kicked out, failed out a little bit or whatever. So it's
Hmm.
kind of like, but he was trying to tell me, that's possible for me. Like and now I still wonder, was he trying to tell me this because he thought that I needed the change, or was he trying to tell me this because he thought I had kind of gotten into some trouble and needed to start over? Was he trying to tell me because he, his own narcissism or whatever? He's like, hey, you're reflecting poorly on me as your
Hmm.
father. Or was it
Hmm.
because he was trying to, like share with me, confide in me this like secret, like, hey, there there's a moment that you're at in which you could just start over. Right, but I agree with you, that even now, even in my generation, that probably was less true a little bit. I mean, I grew up with like my first cell phone was probably, I got it in college, probably my first cell phone, and Facebook would have been after law school, so all after law school, basically. None of that stuff was around during school for me. So I think that that would have been like way different than the people nowadays. You know,
Hmm.
grew up in the period in which people had too, or I was an adult in which there were mommy blogs where you would blog your children instead of putting them on Instagram or Facebook or something, and they all had these nicknames so to protect them, right? Like, hey, we care about the privacy of our children, so we're going to protect them by not making their names public. So therefore, when they're adults, they don't have to be, no one's going to Google them and find out these embarrassing, like, bath photos or whatever else, right? And but then that was kind of lost. That was like in the 2000s, and then in the 2010s or whatever, people don't seem to be, Yeah, as careful about it. So it's interesting kind of to hear that perspective from you too. But why? Why?
Why?
In some ways, you kind of sound a little bit like my dad in the sense that you'd be like, that would be pretty awesome, at least to have the option.
Yeah, just the freedom, I think. Like, um, it's almost like it's not even like I want to like totally destroy my life and not come back to it. It's more just like I wish that I could like, yeah, I feel like I would have the freedom to do more things within my life if I thought that there was a plan B. That like my like you know that my actions wouldn't always like kind of haunt me.
Yeah.
Um, likewise, like I mean, this is the thing that I do actually more or less take part in, like just like kind of like dipping out of your own life, you know,
Mm.
finding like the little pockets, obviously compartmentalizing with groups of friends. I think that that's I've made a lot of people just straight up upset with my refusal to introduce them to people like other people.
Yes. So, my girlfriend Arya is 100% that way. She was like, didn't want to blend, didn't want groups of people, groups of friends to blend. She wanted everything to be basically firewalled off
Yeah.
from each other, compartmentalization. We have a friend, a mutual friend now, who's the same way, and for different reasons, for conflict avoidance on over on that side. But I think to a certain extent, yeah, I think it is because our friend, uh, doesn't want things to bleed, doesn't want kind of the ramifications. Wants, if stuff goes to hell or whatever in one area, wants to still be able to rely on the rest being kind of stable. It's funny you
Yeah.
say this like plan B thing because I felt like I got a lot more chill about my life when I came up with some really good plan Bs that I liked. I had them. I had plan Bs, and then like the book came out, and then everything kind of just like torched up. Even the plan Bs were no longer feasible. So then I had to really, do better about plan B. If your plan Bs like get torched up, they're not a good plan B. Or maybe they're good plan Bs, but go ahead and have plan C and plan D then as well. So now my plan Bs are awesome. And so I think about them all the time when I'm like, man, if everything just goes to hell, then it's this. So I'll tell you, my plan B is to play on a cruise ship in the rhythm section of a cruise ship. And the good thing about this for me is number one, you're like constantly well, you rehearse or whatever, but mostly at night. And then you'd still be able to like get off at whatever ports. And then you play at night too, and it's mostly a sight reading gig for music. So it's like you're you might have a singer or something with you for 2 weeks, and then they get off, and then a new singer comes on for 2 weeks type thing. So they bring their charts with you, and so you're just constantly sight reading, and that just happens to be the thing that I'm best at with music. So I think, yeah, it'd be fun to just like sight read and to play music. Great job. I mean, it pays terribly. I think it pays like $2,000 a month or
Mhm.
something. So that's why I haven't done it, but I still think, well, that'd be like super fun or whatever. I'll probably make Arya come, like work in the kitchen or something. That type of thing, right? People are always like, oh, it'd be so bad. And I was like, well, if it'd be so, it's not so bad. People do it for sure. And yeah, I don't. So that's my plan B. And then I even have a plan C. The plan C is I'll just like be work at ski resorts, teaching like 3-year-olds how to ski. Which I love to ski anyways, and I thought about that recently. I was like, why was this not my plan B earlier? I could have been doing this right away because nobody cares at a ski resort, for crying out loud. Who cares? Anything could follow you there and it'd be like, whatever.
Yeah, right, right. It's like a whole set of tropes and everything, right?
Yeah, so ski
Yeah.
resorts during the winter, and then during the summer, just like go to different amusement parks and work at the amusement parks because I'm a little bit, and Arya especially, a roller coaster junkie. So she's really excited about that one. She's probably more excited about that one than the cruise ship. Like she really wants to do that one. She just like if our life wasn't so good right now, that would be more on the table, I think, as opportunity. But it is kind of funny. I get what you're saying with that because like before I had those ideas, there was just kind of a little bit of a like, oh, people have more control over me than I wish that they did, I guess
Mhm.
was where it was coming from me.
That's where that's kind of that's actually a really succinct way to describe the trap that I feel like I'm in, right? Yeah.
Right, because if everybody, you kind of imagine this should be like a Black Mirror episode or something. The people, either their memory gets wiped or they're blind, or there's something that about it that you feel free to whatever. I watched this movie, I think it's called Coda, and it's about a deaf family, and I forget, they were like kind of funny about like farts, like
Hmm.
because they can't hear them but they can smell them or whatever, and that's what kind of the joke is. They said that or whatever. And it's just kind of like, yeah, stuff like that, like if you're around somebody who, but then I mean, do you feel like you are that way with your partner a little bit? Like you can pretty much just do whatever you want, be yourself around the partner, or is there still some filtering going
Well,
on?
so there's, I think that like it was like a decreasing amount of filtering over time, just like as I kind of like, we were like fully cohabitating. So like there was a certain level where like, I kind of just couldn't keep it up. Like at that level for so long. And it's gradually decreased the amount of like baseline filtering that I was doing. And then when I started to realize things in an active way, and put words to it, and I very gradually shared that with them, what happened was, I think I felt more free to like kind of move between masking and not masking in particular ways. And like, kind of take part in things that I usually wouldn't, like with them or around them. Uh, and then just kind of gauge the and nothing bad has happened is
Yeah.
basically like what's gone on so far. It's like, oh, I did something that I usually wouldn't have done in front of them, and it wasn't that negative. Like, if whether or not they were annoyed or cool with it or not or whatever, it was like everything worked out. And I just mean like really, really small social things to begin with, or just like replies to statements, like one of their friends got hurt and I didn't act like I cared for that long. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then they were like, "Oh, you didn't care, did you?" And I was like, "No, not really." And they weren't mad about it. You know what I mean? Or like it didn't like have some kind of lasting effect on the way that they saw me,
Yeah.
which I think was like, yeah.
And honestly, I can kind of see like sometimes I think we sell other people short a little bit with like the pretending, because
Yeah.
like if they're a reasonable person or something, it's like, well, what
Yeah.
like what good is there in you pretending to care about the friend getting hurt?
And that's like, I mean, that's definitely true. Like they definitely already knew that I didn't really give a shit about a lot of things.
Mhm.
Um, I think that I knew that. It's just like there's just that like really ridiculous kind of id, in my brain that just resists the notion of like letting it be, I think.
And
Does that make sense?
no, no, explain that a
Oh,
little
okay.
bit.
Oh, I did just, there's like this, I mean, just the fact that it's like so thoroughly irrational, the fear,
Mm.
or the paranoia, like even when I'm like, I've for years been aware of the fact that like no one thinks I'm like the nicest person or something like that, or like particularly empathetic, right? Um, Despite that, there's like just still this nagging kind of impulse to, act as if everyone thinks that, and I have to keep up a mask that's like so different from me, just as
Mm.
like maybe like some kind of insurance, so that even if I slip up, they still have all this evidence to the contrary. But I'm just making that up after the fact.
Yeah, yeah, that's like definitely another Arya thing where she she would think of things in terms of that, like, oh, and if I get caught on this, then there's all this other kind of evidence.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
it's really hard to give up on something like that, though, I think. Do you find that's true of you? Like, if you could, if I said, or I mean, if you just decided, I guess is probably a better hypo. If you just decided, hey, I'll stop doing that just right now, could you? Is that something you can just stop doing?
I definitely like, I don't think so now. Sometimes I think that, right? But I don't think that right now. um Sometimes I'll try to like, yeah, no, I definitely couldn't though. I really don't think I could. just
And like,
stop doing it right now.
yeah, what is the rub? Is it because people want to know probably? Is it
Oh,
'cause
yeah.
I totally get it, you know, and I've been saying this, I've been shouting it from rooftops a little bit, but like what is the yeah, what is the rub? What is the thing keeping you from doing it? Is it like you're addicted? Is it that you know, XYZ fill in the blank reasons why people might guess?
Yeah, I think I'm just I think it's maybe I could call it like a lack of imagination.
Mm,
Um like it's hard for me to picture my life without it. Without like that kind of like set of behaviors, or it's hard for me to picture like not just my life but like my comfort or the things that I've come to value about my life without it.
yeah.
Like and that's enough for me to like yeah struggle to yeah like I think if I were to make that decision, that lack of like imagination would still be at play. But then I mean, this is something I'm saying from this perspective, and that speaks to like a kind of second order lack of imagination anyway, right? The fact that I can't even imagine a situation where I'm capable of imagining that.
Yes.
Just because it's just central to my picture of like life and my like world.
Yes. You know, I like that. I like the way that you've described this. You just can't even imagine it. It kind of
Yeah.
makes me think of like the song from Willy Wonka, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
pure imagination. But it is kind of like, I guess it is a little bit in a way a failure of the imagination because it's like, I mean, so let me kind of go back to the practicality of it. Let's say I told you, you know, like, hey, here's how to do it. It's XYZ. Is there a second rub there too where you just wouldn't kind of believe me?
I don't
You know, I'm not
know.
going to tell you there's XYZ,
Yeah.
but
Oh
you
no, of
know,
course not. Yeah,
just
but
kind of like trying to remove that first
the
one of hey,
hypothetical.
lack of imagination, you know, but even then is there just kind of like a part of there where you're like I just don't think that that would work and you need it to work for some reason, and if so, why would you need it to work and what is the work part about it?
Yeah, I actually think that I don't know if there would be a second rub actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. That this is the thing. Like, I mean, it feels so intense, but at the same time, like, I do have a like, I've got a strong enough desire for like this other kind of life, especially now.
Mm.
Um, and I think that that's enough for me to say like, no, I want to believe at very least that if I could remove this like brain block, this imaginative block, I would just say yes to that, right? Like living this more honest life.
Yeah.
Um, sorry, go on.
No, I was just gonna ask, why do you say especially now? You feel this way, especially now?
I think just because I've been able to better identify like things that have been keeping me from like more fulfillment
Yeah.
or like a less boring life. Um, like keep yeah, just basically keeping me from living better,
Yeah.
like on my own terms, if that makes sense. Because I mean, I think that for a while I was like caught up in like a very like indefinite sense of like unease or discomfort or just I mean boredom is really the defining term here.
Mm-hmm.
Like boredom and like just being tired, and like not interested but feeling obligated pretty much all the time.
Yeah. These
Yeah.
are, yeah, I like that description. Not interested, but feeling obligated. And then, how does boredom feel to you?
I don't even it almost feels like a it feels like not being on a certain level for me, like just fully kind of going into my own head, um like removing myself from like the situation, um like just total numbness, which I guess is like maybe yeah after the fact, right? The boredom itself like I don't know, it's just unpleasant, and it's
Mm.
it's like an active like like unpleasantness, But it's also hard to describe in such strong terms because it's like not like it's uncommon at all.
Well, do you think other people experience boredom the same way that you do?
uh, I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like maybe. I don't think that they experience it as much as I do, or in the situations that I do, for sure. Um, but
How much?
also that could
Go
be
ahead.
wrong. Oh,
Yeah.
what?
No, go ahead. How much of well, I'll just go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't
How
care.
much of the parts that you kind of feel like you have to pretend about and hide come from boredom? Is it like 10%, 5%, 30%? Like how much is boredom like kind of caught up with this aspect of pretending? Are they connected at all or not really?
They're definitely connected because I think that I do a lot of things because I feel like I have to pretend that lead me to be more bored.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Um, like actually kind of in the era when I was really falling into this like hardcore pretending all the time when I was like 13, 14, 15. I remember there was this kid who thought that we were best friends at the school that I went to. And the school only like it was like a 12-person class. Um, and so like, you know, all of your social decisions had serious ramifications because it was just like a tiny like, you know, alternate school type deal, like Montessori.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and he thought we were best friends, and he always kind of annoyed me. And then one day, he didn't do anything. I know very distinctly that he hadn't done anything in particular, but I was so fed up with his just kind of personality, that I sent him a text saying like, just don't talk to me for a while. I think I just like told him directly like, I don't like you. Um, and then I left the school, or you know, like that. I sent him that text in the afternoon, and then like I went through the evening. I didn't think about it that much, and then I was like, oh shit, wait, that could really negatively affect me.
Mm-hmm.
Like that I realized that that wasn't an acceptable thing to do to other that maybe wouldn't be acceptable to other people. And so I sent him another text telling him that my brother stole my phone, and then deleted all the messages that I had sent.
Uh-huh.
It was just like this stupid 13-year-old lie. It definitely wouldn't have worked if we weren't like children. Um, but as a result of that second decision to kind of like mend the fence before there was any issue and
Right.
avoid any like negative ramifications, um, I was bored a lot more because I had to keep being his friend.
Yeah. And
And
especially that kind of foreclosed any opportunity for you to be honest with him in the future because you had lied about it.
exactly, yeah. And it's like I'm really good at like managing webs of lies. And it's like it feels more like a curse than a skill because it means that you never like have to give them up.
Yes.
Or not like never, but you know, it's like way down the line. You can just keep it going for so long.
No, I totally get it. There was somebody who kind of wrote me recently, like a couple months ago or something. And then they were kind of like, "Hey, yeah, I'm interested. I kind of am interested in some of the stuff that you're saying and stuff. And like, do you have any advice or whatever?" And but kind of also described like a little bit, like they would be what I would think of as like a playground sociopath, like
Mm-hmm.
perfectly happy living the web of lives. That's essentially what it is. And so I kind of was like, honestly, I don't know that I have anything great to say to you at this stage or something, because it sounds like you're doing great. But you're right. It's kind of a curse too, because if you're so good at the web of lies, then there's kind of like an incentive to just postpone things. It would be like if you're like a really functional alcoholic. Like in some ways that's a curse, because
Mm-hmm.
like you're not forced to just deal with the ish or something.
Yeah,
But
there's no rock bottoming, right? I
yeah.
mean,
I mean,
yeah.
and if alcohol is the meaning you find in your life, okay. But I just don't know that that's common for people for that
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
true. I don't know
Yeah.
that that's a good bet.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I actually, and speaking of the playground stage, I think that there was a point when I did have that, not to make myself sound so unendingly miserable in my life. Like when I went to college, I did have that moment of like recreation or like self recreation because I
Mm.
got to move across the country. You know, I was lucky I got to go out of state, which I was definitely like insistent on. But then I like, you know, became just suddenly outgoing, grew my hair out. You know, I realized very quickly that like the school I was going to, uh, all of the like social hierarchy was this like big ridiculous game between like, you know, rich kids from like the two like coasts.
Mhm.
Um, and so I could play that game really actively and without any scruples because I knew it was a game and I didn't care. And
Mhm.
that was like really, really fun. That was like the most fun I think I've had. And I didn't finish this at school, but that was like the most fun I think I've had in like a long time. Just like kind of playing this like very long form game, having a lot of friends who certainly cared about me and who I cared about, but you know, I mean, they were nice, and now we don't talk, and it's like fine.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was just this. It was this like wonderful period where still, nonetheless, I think I had this like kind of, you know, fear, what I've been talking about throughout, playing in the background. Except I think I found like a new style of like socially melding or performing that gave me some more leeway, if that
Mm.
makes sense. Like in the context of college, where you're allowed to be outrageous without like suffering too much.
Uh-huh. Do you think that's not true anymore of your life? You're not allowed to be outrageous without suffering?
Well, I don't know when I started thinking that again, but I certainly, yeah, I don't think it's true anymore. But then looking back, I don't know where that change is.
And I mean, people probably want to know, this is my guess, like, why can't you go back to that way of being? You know, I heard this phrase, I don't even know if I believe it, but I thought it was interesting at least to think about. Like, if you've lost yourself, maybe think about the last time you had yourself or whatever. That's a terrible paraphrase. You know what I'm saying? But like, if you're kind of feeling, like your life's not going well or as well as it could, maybe go back to the last time that it did seem like it was going well. And do you think that the kind of those college years, do you think you could go back to that way of being, or it wasn't really a sustainable way of being?
That's a good question. Um, Regarding sustainability, I have like really no idea whatsoever. I feel like I'm just really bad about like projecting kind of behavior into the future, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, I've got a lot of like very, very, you know, I'm ambitious professionally, um, but outside of like plans in that wheelhouse, it's really hard for me to imagine like day-to-day behavior existence in like some kind of concerted way, right? Like, oh, if I project this into the future, is this going to get me what I want? It's easier to like kind of piecemeal it. But I mean, I don't know, maybe I could, maybe with some edits, right? I could keep that like college kind of persona or like lifestyle up. uh I think one element of it that was like pretty necessary though is like that, like here's this situation where again more outrageous things are acceptable, but beyond that you have like easy access to like a large or social sphere, because
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, you leave and then your world gets smaller, which, you know, I was fine with in general, but now it's like I have to make efforts to go to parties, I have to make efforts to do all these things, to meet people, etc. And most of the time I'd rather not do that than do it, because before I think about the fun I could have or the things that I could get up to, you know, the freedom I could maybe find if I expand this social net, um, before I think about any of that, the first thing I think about is the cost, which is the exhaustion of other people, having to like mask in that like more intense, like, you know, social outing way, like at a party where you're like, you know, uh, gregarious or entertaining with like strangers and all that, and like you're making sure not to tell the wrong jokes or like all the things that go into like going to a party or a bar or just out. I generally tend to avoid those things a lot of the time, I think, just because I know that there's this cost. And while it may lead to some kind of enrichment down the road, if I'm going out with friends that I already have, then I feel like I you know, have this other layer of masking or like personality that I have to put up with anyway. And if I'm not going out with them, then I'm not going to go out anyway because it just doesn't seem worth the effort. Uh, yeah.
So
What?
is that the way though you thought about going to bars and parties, during college or whatever? Is that it's just going to be masking and you'll have to be charming?
No, that's the thing is that's where I don't know like where that change really started, or because I still had that fear. Like it occurs to me that there's really like, I don't know, two distinct eras after I become an adult, and one of them almost feels like a kind of like return to this playground stage that I had when I was a child. It was like I have the childishness, it's fun, it's nice. I enter into my teenage years, total fear, shutdown nerd, paranoid, like I'm not doing anything. College, back at it, then adulthood, it's like gone again. And I don't really know what signaled that change, except maybe, I mean, honestly, no. It occurs to me it's just exhaustion because I
Mm-hmm.
was getting tired that whole time. Like
Yeah.
I was gung ho to go out and prove myself and fuck around, but in the end, it's like you just get tired. It's like I'd rather stay home. I'd rather not put up with it. It doesn't seem worth it. I don't know. It could just be depression, right?
Could be. And why does it not seem worth it?
That was what I was saying about the depression. Like I don't know why it doesn't seem worth it, because not doing it certainly is pretty dreadful right now too.
Right.
Uh, but I don't know. Uh, I don't think I could pin down any particular uh, explanation
Mm-hmm.
for why it's not now and it was, except for maybe exhaustion on some like mental, social level, or just getting older. But beyond that, I think it's really just yeah. I'd say probably something like depression is definitely in play. Like I guess that's kind of like just kicking the can down the road in terms of causes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, it's just a yeah. I guess I still don't really have an explanation. Yeah, apologies to the future listeners if I'm not providing kind of this solid background or explanation here. I think it's just difficult for me to access that in myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
let's maybe talk a little bit about that. So, what makes it difficult to access in yourself?
What makes it difficult for me to access like the my own feelings, or like the
Yes.
my motivations?
Yes.
I feel like I've always uh, been relatively incapable of accessing those things, like the greater or the deeper causes, or like the explanations behind my feelings, usually my feelings. Like I've yeah, I've pretty consistently just been like a little bit of opaque to myself. I've just been opaque to myself, I think, for most of my life. Um, Not in any like distressing way, except one time I took an acid trip and had like a lot of really terrible epiphanies. But other than that, it's never been distressing, like that fact in itself. Um, but that's certainly kind of at play here. Just this like baseline opacity, where like I see myself like wanting to do things or not wanting to do things, being tired, being energetic, occasionally like deeply disliking people, liking people, all these things, but I don't really have like hardcore causes, or like after the fact I can maybe find them a little bit. Like occasionally I'll like come to really deeply dislike a person, and usually what I'll realize is that like uh they're acting false in a way that I recognize because I used to act false in that way and I could see through it. Or um I'll realize that, you know, they're insecure in X, Y, or Z ways that I like had some kind of experience with, not like being insecure myself usually, but like some person or another who was insecure in that way. And that I felt that that insecurity was harmful or annoying or whatever. Um, like say 10 years in the past, I can draw lines after the fact, but usually it's just this baseline reaction that I can't see past all that easily.
So would you
That's
do you
how my
think
emotions feel.
yeah, so your emotions, would you say that you feel them deeply,
Uh,
shallowly? Do they have a lot of context to you or a lot of meaning to you or not really that much context or meaning?
Not that much context or meaning at all. Um, they can be super deep for a second, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Like I can suddenly be in them, especially like anger or like annoyance. I feel like I can distinguish between various kinds of displeasure a lot more than I can distinguish between various kinds of like pleasure, if that
Uh-huh.
makes sense. I feel like I can be very wrathful, for instance, and those things I think I can like kind of be in for a minute. Like I can get kind of obsessive with it.
Mm.
Um, if it's like focused on somebody who has actually wronged me, or like, you know, that I feel like some kind of like license to be really angry at. Um, but like, yeah, usually my emotions are pretty shallow. Which it doesn't feel bad. And like, you know, I'm usually pretty like I think I'm capable of say like happiness or like pleasure, joy, maybe, you know what I mean? Like uh but it's always like it's a faint feeling and it goes away pretty quickly.
Yeah, do you think that you enjoy these emotions when you get them then, like wrathful, kind of
Oh,
angry?
absolutely. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they're really exciting. And it
Mm.
also like throws you into something in a way that I think like the kind of like constant or like you know, permanent masking usually keeps you from being thrown into things. I think that the anger can cut through that in this
Yeah.
big way where it's like you have this justification and this kind of like quest, right?
Uh-huh.
um like that's how I've thought about it in the past, at least. Like uh yeah, it's
So
like it. Oh yeah, sorry, go on.
yeah, it's interesting because I mean, I get this too with other people maybe. I don't think it's unusual to kind of be like, "Oh, this is awesome." You know, I don't have that much maybe sense of you said earlier fulfillment,
Mhm.
can we also kind of use close synonyms? Are these close synonyms for you like meaning or purpose?
Yeah, yeah.
Or like synonyms, they don't have to be super close, but kind of getting at a similar idea.
Could you restate the beginning of that sentence? Actually, apologies, I got distracted for a second.
No problems. Would you say you used the earlier you said, that you don't have that much of a sense of fulfillment about life?
Oh
Uh
yeah.
yes, and would you say that the synonyms to fulfillment for you might also be like meaning and purpose, life
um
satisfaction?
so like in the short term I would say that those are definitely synonyms,
Uh-huh.
but in the long term not as much, just because I do feel a sense of like purpose through like these like kind of like, you know, professional goals that I have. My plan A, I don't have a plan B in terms of like things that I really want to be doing, which is I imagine, you know, that could become an issue. And that might be also a reason why I'm so keen on not breaking things.
Mm.
But Yeah, I think, yeah, long term I do have that this sense of like purpose and even excitement, like things to look forward to, you know, progress to make, like steps to take. But it doesn't affect my day-to-day life all that much, and I certainly lack like meaning or purpose in like, you know, getting up, cleaning, seeing people, you know, all those things.
Yeah. It reminds me of another Zoom with Doomer, I think, is who said this, is that the days are too long, but life is too short.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's super accurate. That's a good one. Uh, yeah, I think because I used to have this like super. It wasn't an intense fear of death. Well, so last summer during like the riots and all that, I used to live in like a very rough neighborhood, and there was like 60 or 70 Latin kings out on the street uh, for like 4 days, just like right outside our house, and they were like, kind of mobbing, attacking people. There were like a couple of drive-bys. It was it was like one of the funniest things. We hear this car full of because it's like a Mexican gang, or in that neighborhood is Mexican, and they're at war with a black gang, and then all the riots happen. So of course they start to freak out because it brings in all this like weird racial conflict. And I'm black, so it's like uh suddenly the street is a little bit dangerous for me.
Mm.
But one day I just hear like I'm sitting outside, I'm listening to like the like kind of mob going on. They're like screaming, drunk. And I'm just not going outside, obviously. But then I just like hear this car kind of like squeal up, and you hear this guy shout, "Black Lives Matter," and then you just hear like a machine gun blast into the crowd. It was like, yeah, 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 like full automatic firing into this crowd. He shot an Uzi after shouting "Black Lives Matter," and I was like, oh fuck, this has ruined my week. I and so I sorry, that's a little bit of a tangent. It's really funny to me though. Just like
No, it's
hearing
a
like
very interesting story. Yeah.
but like but from like that kind of like occurrence, I developed for a minute there like this kind of like fixation on death, or this fear of death, where I was like I really was thinking like, oh man, I could die and I really don't want to because I haven't done anything. And that's always been like, when I have this little like flare up of like, I don't know if anxiety is the right word or just fear, or what the emotional word is. When I'm thinking about death and thinking I want to avoid that, it's pretty much exclusively couched in terms of like the failure to do things that I want to do, pursue exciting experiences and success and fulfillment and all these things.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, that was a very long-winded way to talk about like kind of life being too short.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting. And before we kind of like move off this topic, maybe like I had like this thought about kind of like anger, rage, frustration even sometimes can be like pleasurable, be irritation because you, as you said, you have this kind of target. And I does it feel like, to me at least, it used to feel like a little bit of a temporary release, like
Mm-hmm.
we can kind of postpone feelings of like I don't know what to do
Yeah,
in this moment, in
yeah,
order to feel engaged in life because you kind of are reactionary, but you are engaged. You suddenly do
yeah.
have like this, yeah,
It's like
project.
it's like you're an arrow. Like
Yeah.
you're all direction and purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and also like it's engaging. It's like engaging all of you,
Yeah.
right? Like there's no remove, because usually even when I'm like fully engaged, or like I would consider myself more or less engaged, like there's just that part of me that's like not interested, thinking about something else, or just like kind of pre-scripting the words, like. But when you're like really caught up in like great anger, it's like just complete, I feel like.
And I mentioned kind of I can see it too, and not just I have a theory that sociopaths tend to suffer this malaise of boredom, kind of ennui, emptiness, lack of meaning. Uh, but I see it in other people too. It's not like just sociopath or even sociopath adjacent people who experience this. There's a lot of people who, I think feel this feeling that you've mentioned is that, if I die, have I really lived my life? Have I really fulfilled my potential, my, done the things I wanted to do,
Yeah,
etc. And so I think people I wonder now, like how much of kind of the rageful society that we sometimes find ourselves in is because of not because people are inherently rageful or hateful to each other, but because it does feel good, you know? It feels good to kind of like have that sense of purpose and to just feel that like almost existential burden, is how I would sometimes describe it, at
Yeah,
least. Yeah, relieved, you know, at least temporarily, and be like, oh, now we have this thing going on. And so it's a quick perspective shift, but it's one that feels so nice, because it's like if you've been like driving, you know, through Nebraska or something for a long time, and then suddenly you see even just one hill, you're like, awesome. Very, very nice to get that kind of like breakup, you know, like a little bit of variety and in the thing that you are plotting through at the time.
yeah, yeah. No, that's super true. I feel like yeah, it's. I think that there have been points in my life when I've been able to like tap into that like kind of passion without anger. Like say like college years, like the big complicated social games, or like being in a band performing, or but like at like some fucked up like smoky house show, you know, just like
Mm.
really ridiculous like punk kitty stuff. Um, that gave this sense of like momentary fulfillment where you could like look out and see that you're kind of like in this ridiculous thing, and like almost the remove that's still being maintained just feeds back into it because it's so enjoyable to like see yourself doing these things, and then you can pull out of that remove and be fully engaged because it's kind of crazy what's going on, or like, you know, oh my god, it's so chaotic, like you can kind of like regain this passion through like non-angry chaos, or at least I felt like I could, and that was like what I was pursuing a lot of the time, like more so than like, you know, drugs or sex or anything like that. Like the desire is really just for the like tumult.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
interesting, the again a great word choice, engaged, is the way that you said. And so you're kind of saying then the contrast is like a lot of your day to day you do not feel engaged with the things that you're doing.
Pretty much 100% disengaged, even when it's something that I claim to like.
Yeah.
Uh, like I can like, you know, go to a film festival, I'm watching the movie. Later on, I'm going to give it 4.5, 5 stars, you know, whatever. I'm going to talk about it in fawning terms. And I do think it's good, but while I'm watching it, I'm half asleep and thinking about something else.
Dang
I'm
it.
I'm trying to, yeah, I'm trying to plan out the bathroom visit. You know what I mean? It's like while I'm there, I just don't want to be.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I forget what you mentioned before. Now I feel badly about this, but I thought at the time it reminds me, maybe it was music, or no, you said, I think it was you being acting as a director. And so for
Yeah.
me, I feel like I get that often with music, especially with jazz music, is that it kind of forces you to be engaged and in this
Yeah.
like clearly defined role, which is really nice. You know, especially I play rhythm section instruments, and so those are really clearly defined
Yeah.
roles,
Yeah.
you know. And
Yeah.
it just feels so great to be like, here I am, you know, performing this role really well. Everybody, you know, likes this role that I'm doing because it sets them up for, you know, doing other sorts of roles, you know.
Hmm.
And I used to, you know, even before therapy, think this is like, you know, the closest I can feel to other people
Hmm.
and engaged with other people is, you
Hmm.
know, I'm listening to the other people in this, you know, ensemble, and interacting with them in ways that seem really pure to me and really genuine, and like
Yeah.
there's zero pretense coming from me. You know, even if I'm
So.
kind of like, I get that this is a Latin piece, so I'm going to play it differently than I would play, you know, a funk piece or something. I'm still, you know, I'm adapting, but I still am very much me, you know, it's still my voice. And so that was like a rare instance in which I would actually hear my own voice
Hmm.
in life, is in music. I think that's why I liked it so much. I wonder if that's why you pursue your creative pursuits.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting because like, yeah, on a certain level, yes. Like I can feel like this. I can see myself and I can hear myself through the work in a
Mm-hmm.
way that I can't otherwise. And that's definitely been like a through line with me. But at the same time, I think it's maybe not so pure. Like even when I was super young, and I wrote a poem when I was like 6 or 7 when I found out what poetry was, and it was about my like brother who had just died or something like that, and it made my mother cry. But I have the distinct memory of like learning what poetry was and learning what like kind of like, you know, the not hard rule, but like the obvious like kind of implication that poetry should be emotionally powerful,
Mm,
right? Like I learned that quickly and I just wanted to try it out. I don't even know why. It just seemed fun. And so I chose something that I knew I had access to that was emotionally powerful, but I didn't feel the emotions in the words at all. And I didn't feel them later, but when I saw that my mom cried, I thought, well, that's interesting. And that's really where my pursuit of writing came in, was just in this kind of like, I don't know, it wasn't inauthentic, right? But at the same time, my interest has always been in like the kind of like feelings of other people that I don't share.
mm,
Later on, I got really caught up with authenticity, and it made my writing maybe better, certainly more me. And I think it would be hard for me to walk back that decision to be authentic in my writing and the emotions that I show,
mm-hmm,
because I got really disgusted with inauthenticity. I wrote this poem that was very successful in college, like played a lot, made all the teachers like me, and I like immediately really hated it because I had lied and just gone for all these easy emotions that I didn't feel at all, about myself. And I don't know. I have this more authentic writing now. I can see myself in it, but what I've lost is a lot of that connection, because I think that people still find a lot from my work, but they don't find easy emotional connection at all.
mm,
In fact, I would say that a common experience for me now is that people will say they very much liked a poem, because I write poetry stuff occasionally. They very much liked it, and they'll speak about it in terms of like negative emotions when, say, I was trying to write something that was funny, or like I was trying to write something that was, you know, disengaged, or just expressing like, you know, what I think is like a genuine reaction to X, Y, or Z situation. I don't know who you, but you know, like there's I see this deeper disconnect when my writing is connected with me. I see a deeper disconnect with the rest of people, and the same is true for my films, where I'm making this thing, you know, blind. I'm not thinking about what it means. I'm just trying to like express something or tell a story, um, and then it comes out, and people like it, and they like it because it's condemning this or supporting that or XYZ. It's saying all these things that I never intended. No matter what interview you give, uh, they pretty much never pretty much never gets at what you mean for it to get
mm-hmm.
at least by and large. I'm content with that, but it's also a little bit of an alienating factor in the creative work, because like I'm having like two separate conversations with like the public and myself, uh, and it's certainly manageable. And honestly, I'm not too neurotic about it, just because I mean I don't really care about what they think that much. Uh, I don't particularly like the average like reader or viewer. You know, I can put up with them, but they're kind of just an unfortunate necessity, is how I've described them verbatim in the past,
Mm-hmm.
with the work. I wish that I could just kind of work blind and not show anyone anything on occasion, but at the same time, I like want something like recognition, or really just a budget, because with filmmaking you can't just work blind. You know, you can't just like work in a little hut for your whole life, die, and then have everything be released. uh, Sorry, that's a little bit too much of a ramble, but to get back to being a director and performing a role with actors, I think that like there is a genuineness there, but it's also predicated on like my ability to like kind of not get so caught up in people as people. Like it's easy for me to like cast well and see actors as their roles, or like their qualities that I want in the roles, and just kind of like cut through all that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you mentioned this earlier too. You said, something that can kind of irritate you is to see people be false in ways
Yeah.
that you have been false before. So it does seem like you do have a value for authenticity, because I mean, you're sacrificing kind of the easy wins, it sounds like, in your art,
Yeah.
connecting with people in ways that are,
Well,
let's say, maybe there might be like an do you think, well, just ask, do you think there's a little bit of manipulation to your art before that you're trying to kind of provoke these emotions?
Definitely. There there was there was like I mean I think I saw it in terms of manipulation. I still do now. I think that at the time I got super fed up with that, like the inauthenticity of the manipulation, just because uh, there was no authenticity beneath it. If that makes sense, I think that that's where the like kind of disgust in my own work came from, where I started to value authenticity because I didn't have it. Um, and I think that that's probably where my issues with authenticity really do just, or like my annoyance with people who seem inauthentic in a way that I used to be. Um, I think that that's like kind of like a deferred annoyance with myself or dislike of myself, because like yeah, there still is just this absolute struggle to be authentic, or like to know my authentic self, not be, but just to know it on my own. Like I edge closer, hopefully. Um, but like that inability to know, I think like generates the annoyance, or the dislike of inauthenticity, because I'm like stuck there. It's definitely one of those you know unfortunate, or I'm sure telling things for someone else. Like if I say like, oh yeah, I dislike that person because they remind me of myself.
Uh-huh.
I definitely, it definitely sounds uh neurotic, or I don't even know if neurotic is the right word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
but
you
the
do
experience
feel
of it makes perfect
go,
sense. What?
yeah, you do feel stuck though. You feel like there are things that you wish that you could, you know, things that you wish that you could experience differently, let's say, not even be different or do differently, but experience differently, and you don't know how to do it.
Yeah, I don't particularly know how to do it. Um, I think just because it's a change in mindset. And like I said, I've been pretty opaque to myself for a long time. And so like even the process of recognizing what's going on, which is I think that's the process I'm engaged in now, right? Like
Hmm.
now in this conversation, but also in general. Like uh that process is not like untangling the knot so much as just tracing the string through it so far. Like I'm just trying to figure out what that shape is, or like what the shape of my uh, thinking or understanding of this part of myself, this like inability to be authentic or see or experience things differently, is made up of.
Hmm.
Because that's really just, it's so far away from me right now, I think. It gets closer, I think, a lot of the time as I like think about it, or like piece together, talk about it. Like I didn't even realize the link between my father and myself until like earlier this year. Like I used
Hmm.
to say like I used to tell people like, yeah, I can't really trace my personality from my two parents at all. I like, I don't get this whole, Oedipal drama thing. Like I don't understand it. I've got no links to my parents personality wise. And it's like, that's just not true. But I was incapable of seeing it like at all. Right. So like gradually just realizing maybe facts about myself.
I wouldn't kind of like sweat it too much as somebody who I feel like I have gone through a process not not too unfamiliar from the process you're going through, and
Mm-hmm.
this authenticity, like there's an authenticity in just the realizing that
Yeah.
there's kind of something going on there. And it's actually really refreshing to talk to and I think talk to people who are in all different stages of progression. Like we have kind of general stages that like psychology seems to acknowledge about childhood, young adulthood, whatever, etc. But I also think I feel like I maybe have identified a few kind of generalities about stages that people kind of like us might go through. And I think it's so interesting to talk to people who are in stages that I feel like maybe I was in before, or I might be in the future, because it's such a snapshot of reality. Like this is reality, even though it may seem kind of hard to engage with, a reality that's hard to engage with.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. Like it's you know how people are like, oh, you're only, 7 years old once, like I think there's some of that now. Like I almost wish that in certain kind of instances, like wherever I was, progressing through the stage, that I was fine, a little bit more fine being there. I think it's good to have, not to be too kind of didactic or normative, like saying that things are good or bad or whatever. But like, I think that it's nice to have an impetus to change. I think usually the impetus to change, I've never once kind of sensed that impetus to change is like coming from a bad place from a person. So I just kind of generally believe that it's coming from a good place, and a place of identity, and a place of like
Mhm.
authenticity or genuineness, as you would kind of say. um yeah, it's really interesting to talk to you and get kind of this unique perspective about like this little snapshot of exactly where you are. So
Mhm.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think you have something that you need to get to. Are there any things that you want
Yeah.
to say that we haven't talked about yet?
Um, or I'll just as a comment on the last thing you said.
Hmm.
There was I had a very particular thought. What was it? Oh yeah. Just in this recognition, kind of like it, like the triumphs or the like successes that have come just from like realizing things about myself, like seeing, oh, there's things off. I'll totally, yeah, agree and second that by saying like there's like a lot of excitement and focus and engagement in that, and there's been like multiple or like more moments of like you know non-boredom or like investment in my life recently, just through that recognition process, and then like just the ability to like see myself and recognize things that I had never been able to contextualize before.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's just something to add to what you just said, and I think you're definitely right.
Yeah. It's interesting, like uh you mentioned, I wonder if people are a little bit surprised. You mentioned that you're black, right?
Mhm.
And is there like before we get off, I wonder if there's like anything about kind of that experience that gives you like you know, everybody has a unique perspective. So, but I hesitate to say that, but like the way that people perceive you, like, do you think there's even more disconnect in that kind of sense, that people perceive you as being this particular thing? But do you, like,
Yeah, well, yeah, I
go
mean,
ahead.
I've had these like super marked, out in the open identities my whole life. And I always experienced like an extreme disconnect between myself and other members of groups I was in, especially because they had this sense of togetherness that I just never, I was always like fully apart from it. Like, uh, and it never like distressed me. It occasionally like confused me, like just like on some like weird existential level. I was like, oh, should I be performing this way or that? Um, and I like, I learned how to change up my speaking like very quickly and easily. Like it took like that to a fish to water, and it became like just another way to like have fun, fuck around, like to like code switch, so to speak, and then to like work out kind of like a very particular speech and like personality performance, like when I left home, predicated on the fact that like, oh yeah, I'm black and most people here are white, or like I'm X and everyone else is Y. I mean, it's honestly, it's a being a minority is like a little bit, and this is definitely one of those things that I don't think most of my friends would agree with. It's a comfort because I can not meld in certain ways without anyone batting an eye at it.
Hmm.
Like I like white spaces or like non-black spaces because like I already stick out, and so they're weirdly paradoxically willing to just treat differences downstream of that, even though I know that it's not right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get it. It's interesting, like, I maybe feel like the thing I relate to most about this is kind of like the Mormon world. Like, if you
Mhm.
kind of show up to some random Mormon congregation in like jeans, automatically they're like, okay, visitor, you know?
I yeah, I
And you can kind of just do whatever you want. But if you kind of like look the part, act the part, then like little things, you know, you take the sacrament with your left hand instead of your right hand, they might be like, what's happening? You know, just like kind of like very like the sensitivity, the kind of tolerance to, you know, to differences is just so much higher. So it is interesting to hear you. Yeah, I feel like I've played around with that just a little bit, but yeah, it's interesting to hear that experience.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, that's one of the reasons why, like, initially committed to, oh right, I'm not, I've got like ridiculous, I've got a ridiculous haircut, is all
Mm.
I'll say. Um, but it it's the same kind of thing. It affords me so much extra like social laxity no matter where I'm at, because it's just like, oh, you stand out, you're an eccentric, so you can, you can do X or Y, and people are just gonna be like, oh, that person's just weird. Like, and that honestly does feel like a form of authenticity for me, or near authenticity, because you're really just saying, like, I mean, you are saying a true thing. You're saying it in a mediated way, and you're like assuming that people are, making assumptions about you that aren't necessarily true, but they speak to the, like, spirit of the truth. I don't know. Yeah, it makes sense. It's
Yeah,
fun.
it's interesting because, you know, maybe it's kind of your background with this a little bit, but sometimes I see, you know, psychopaths, you know, like the desire to blend. They'll kind of desire to blend in like a lot of different ways, but you have kind of found like a blending, a camouflage in being and looking obviously different is
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah, yeah,
interesting.
yeah. But then, I mean, obviously it has limits, right? Like, I I like, as soon as wearing masks was normal, I wore masks everywhere. But then, I mean, for COVID. But then, like, even in the heart of the pandemic, if I was like I was on like a road trip, and I walk into a place where no one was wearing masks, and I was like, oh, fucking, I was walking in with my friends because we were, all in the car together. And I immediately took the mask off as soon as I saw that other people weren't, because I didn't want to stand out in that way. And my two friends were like horrified. Like, they were like, how could you do that? And I was like,
Uh-huh.
oh, it's like I didn't want them to say something. Like, I didn't want them to fuck with us or whatever. Like, I don't want to seem like X, Y, or Z. And they're like, that's no, you're supposed to wear the mask for health. And I was like, oh,
Oh, not
yeah, I don't know.
for social
Yeah,
conformity or
yeah, right. But meanwhile, I'm like, a vaguely homosexual seeming like black person, like walking into like a rural gas station in rural Alabama. I'm like, I can't wear a mask. That's one
Mm.
step too many,
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's interesting. Even that
Yeah,
concept about one step too many. Maybe I have like one last question. It's kind of more of a hypothetical question,
yeah.
based on what we've been talking about, obvious differences or not obvious differences. If there was kind of a way for you to like signal outwardly that you were, you know, kind of psychopathically minded, psychopathic adjacent, what did you say? More likely than not?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Would you choose to do that, or do you think that is what did you say about the mask?
Yeah, yeah.
Is that
I
like just one step too many?
No, well, I think it depends on the context, but I mean, what I've always been like, even without being aware of it, one thing that I like, do when somebody's getting close to me, and I'm obviously not being fully myself, but like, I do have this, I inherited this sense of humor, this joke style from my father. That's just, I mean, it's like you just take something that happened in real life. It's, it's gallows humor, but like applied totally inappropriately, right? And then this doesn't signal to anyone that you're a psychopath, but it's like the closest thing I can think of to like signaling like this kind of absolute lack of empathy, where it's just like, okay, I'm going to go totally inappropriate and it's funny, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I definitely like just genuinely have that sense of humor. And one way that I can kind of weed out people that I want to keep at arm's length versus people that I like want to like have like kind of in my own little flock, right, is like whether or not they respond positively or negatively to that. So I
Yeah.
guess I do have like already like a real world lighter version of that. Though
Yeah,
I
a
don't,
little litmus
yeah,
test.
yeah, exactly. Like, can you hang really? Like, is this cool to you, or is this like, oh, I would never?
Mhm.
Uh, but other than that, I mean, if I could really fully signal it, would I? Probably in specific contexts and not other ones.
Yeah, I agree.
Just because walking around in the street, it's like I don't want to wear the T-shirt, you know?
Yeah, it's not like I'm trying to hide things, but I
Yeah,
just
no,
think yeah, I still have that secrecy a little bit. I think it's just privacy. I don't think everybody needs to know everything about me all the time.
exactly, exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, I have a little bit, not an issue, but I don't. I would like, slightly prefer a lot of people to not share so much about themselves anyway, right? Like I feel like there is like too much of this like absolute authenticity all the time thing that some people invest into, or like some personalities. And I don't think it's necessarily useful, but there's definitely like a middle ground. Sorry, that's just a random non sequitur about like preference, right? But
No,
I
I
totally get
agree.
that.
It's
Yeah.
like the panopticon or whatever, the fact that we're being watched all the time. Can there be true authenticity if we feel like we're being watched all the time? I feel like I always am different depending on if the lights are on or off.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
And I feel
for
like,
whatever it is, for whatever the thing is, so yeah, interesting. Okay, I should probably let you go. I think you have something to get to, but it's been an
yeah, I've got
absolute
another
pleasure
Zoom meeting.
talking
Yeah,
with
yeah,
you. I
yeah.
really
Great,
appreciate you
great.
making the time.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great. Talk or yeah, bye bye.
Laters.